Good morning, dear colleagues. We're starting now. It's already 11 minutes past the hour, so please take your seats. Good morning, dear colleagues. This morning we have in our agenda the consideration of 2 CRPs and 2 L documents. CRP 10 on biodiversity and agriculture, item 7. CRP 7 on invasive alien species, item 10. Document L2 on GBO 5 and document L4 on IPBES. Before we consider these documents, we will hear progress reports from the co-chairs of the ongoing contact groups. On the monitoring approach for the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, item 3, and on biodiversity and health, item 9. This is a very ambitious agenda. In less than 3 hours, we will hear updates from 3 contact groups and consider 4 documents. Therefore, we need to be very efficient. I count on your kind cooperation and flexibility, taking into account the very challenging circumstances involved in holding 3 meetings simultaneously. Let's start with progress report from contact groups. Colleagues, you will recall that the contact group on the monitoring framework, item 3, was mandated to further consider and develop the monitoring approach for the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework contained in the non-paper, and that once approved, it will be annexed to the draft recommendation contained in document L3. We will consider the final outcome of the contact group in a future plenary. Today, we will hear a progress report from the colleagues of the contact group on this item, which met on the afternoon and evening of last Thursday and last night for a total of 3 sessions. So I'll give the floor to Mr. Andrew Stotts from the UK. Mr. Stotts, you have the floor. Is he around? From the UK.
Thank you, Chair. Our colleague, Andy Stott, isn't here. I'm not sure if he was expecting to give a report or not, but we'll try and find him if you can give us a few minutes and maybe go on to other reports first. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, he was advised. So meanwhile, we move to next report on the co-chairs, and then we'll come back to that point. So by now, we will now hear a report from the co-chairs of the contact group on item 9 on biodiversity and health, which met on Tuesday, 15 March and Wednesday, 16 March. So I give the floor to Ms. Marina von Weissenberg from Finland. So microphone to Finland.
Thank you, Chair. Mrs. Helena Brown and I had the honor to co-chair the 2 contact group sessions on biodiversity and health. At the first session, we heard from 19 parties, 2 major groups, and 4 observers. We reviewed the introductory sections, element 1 of element 2 of the draft Global Action Plan. At the second session, we finalized the review of the draft Global Action Plan and reviewed the recommendation. We heard interventions from 26 parties, 1 non-party, 1 major group, and 5 observers. A non-paper reflecting the intervention was subsequently issued. In view of the comments received, my co-lead and I advised that we reconvene as a contact group to continue our discussions and deliberations and develop a CRP. Subsequently, the Bureau agreed and decided to hold a third contact group session tonight from 7:30 p.m. to 10 p.m. in the evening. Welcome. The outcome of the contact group discussions will lead to the issuance of a CRP to be considered in our next SBSTTA plenary. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Ms. von Weissenberg, and the entire contact group and the Secretariat for all your hard work. Since the third version of the non-paper on this agenda contains about 600 comments, it is not ready to be discussed in the plenary. Therefore, the SBSTTA Bureau decided that the contact group on this topic will reconvene, as Marina said, for a third session tonight. The contact group on item 6 on conservation and sustainable use of marine and coastal biodiversity will move to Thursday, 24 March. So please be aware of this change. The timing of the contact group of EPSAS scheduled for Tuesday, 22nd March has not changed, right? Regarding item 6, please also note that there's a new information document that has been made available to inform the deliberations of the contact group on CRP4 on EPSAS. This document is available online as document INF 39. Okay, so with this we have the report on health. I'm wondering if Mr. Stotts is ready for the report or on agenda item 3. Not yet.
Thank you, Chair. We have called him, and he is on his way, and he's not here yet. So, yes, we'll get him in the room as soon as we can. Thank you.
So we'll revisit that issue later on. Thank you. Let us take up CRP 10 on agenda item 7 on biodiversity and agriculture. The contact group on item 7, led by Mr. Adams Toussaint from St. Lucia and Mr. Norbert Barlocher from Switzerland, met last Wednesday afternoon with a mandate to discuss the annex to the draft recommendation contained in document L7, providing the draft plan of action 2020-2030 for the International Initiative for Conservation and Sustainable Use of Soil Biodiversity. This annex is now contained in document CRP 10. Before we begin our consideration, I would like to recall the process envisaged for this agenda item. Once we approve CRP 10, it will replace the annex contained in document L7, which is bracketed in its entirety. We will then issue a revised version of document L7 as L7 Ref 1, which will contain both the draft recommendation and the annex for adoption at an upcoming plenary. Now, I wish to invite the co-chair of the contact group to report on the outcomes of its discussion. Mr. Toussaint from St. Lucia, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. On behalf of my co-chair, Mr. Norbert Barlocher, and I'm pleased to report that the contact group on biodiversity and agriculture took place from 3 to 5:30 p.m. on Wednesday, 16th of March. This contact group considered the annex to the document CBD/SBSTTA-24 L7, containing the draft plan of action 2020 to 2030 for the International Initiative for the Conservation and Sustainable Use of Soil Biodiversity. We received from 22 parties, intervention from 22 parties, and 3 observers, which were mostly text-based suggestions. From what we heard, there were only a few areas of divergence. As such, in preparation for CRP 10, which was issued yesterday, we aim to achieve a balanced reflection of various views and opinions throughout the compromise text. And we hope it will be acceptable to all. We thank all the delegates who have provided constructive inputs to improve this annex. I thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Toussaint, and to Norbert for that succinct summary. And thanks to all the participants in the contact group for all your hard work. I've been notified that Mr. Andrew Stott is here in the room, so let's go back to the report on progress for agenda item 3. So please, microphone to UK.
Thank you, Chair, and apologies for being late arriving. I'd like to provide an update on the contact group on the monitoring framework. The contact group met 3 times, twice on March the 17th and once on March the 16th. And we're meeting 2 more times on March the 21st and the 23rd. The mandate of the contact group was to address the annex to the L3 document on the proposed monitoring framework for the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. The document CBD/SBSTTA-24/L3 was prepared for adoption at this SBSTA Part 1. L3 provides a draft recommendation which makes reference to the monitoring framework to be provided in Annex 1, which is currently empty. The purpose of our work in the contact group is to provide that annex. During the contact group, we have been proceeding through indicators in the proposed monitoring framework with a focus on assessing the suitability of the headline indicators or the need to propose alternative indicators within the monitoring framework. To remove headline indicators from the headline level or to add additional headline indicators to capture key elements of the post-20 Global Biodiversity Framework. During the first 3 sessions of the contact group, we have discussed indicators relating to the targets of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. We have received feedback on the proposed indicators in the non-paper with a focus on the headline indicators, and we received suggestions for additional or alternative indicators. So far, in the 3 sessions, we've discussed targets 1 to 6 and 9 to 19. We skipped 7 and 8 due to the fact that they had not been discussed by the working group, contact group, on those targets. We will proceed with the remaining targets and the goals, as well as paragraphs 1 to 7 of the annex on Monday the 21st. Following those discussions, we will prepare 2 non-papers which we will review in the final meeting of the contact group. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much to both colleagues, to Andrew and Alfred for the hard work. The contact group on the monitoring framework, item 3, will meet again on Monday evening for its fourth session. And also, I'd like to remind you that there's a new document published on the organization of the work of the contact group on agenda item 3, the monitoring framework version 3 that was issued today. So that is available on documents for SBSTTA-24 with more details on what the colleague just mentioned. So with that, we finish with reports of ongoing contact groups, and let's move to CRP 10. All right. Colleagues, I think we can all agree on the importance of conserving and sustainably using of soil biodiversity. The action plan before us is based on the status of the World Soil Resources Report and on the preliminary findings of the state of knowledge on soil biodiversity, the status, challenges, and potentialities prepared by FAO and the Intergovernmental Technical Panel of Soils. Before we take up this item, I would like to emphasize that this plan is voluntary. You may take advice from it as you see fit, and in this spirit, I hope we can be flexible and swift in our deliberations here today. Now, I would like to go through document CRP 10, which is 11 pages long, section by section. So let's go to section 1 on the introduction. So I open the floor for comments on this document. So section 1 covers paragraphs 1 to 7. I see Brazil. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and we are very grateful for the efforts of the co-leads. However, we understand that such long tests and that are very different, sometimes opposite comments from the floor, we would recommend that future CRPs to be prepared with brackets of the main issues, so it's easier for the delegations to follow what are the main points of discussion, since you have several tests in front of us. But regarding the first section of the CRP 10 we have in front of us, Brazil has a comment on paragraph 3. We struggle to understand the relationship between agriculture and nature-based solutions at this stage. And I want to recall that there is a reference to the UNEA resolution, but at the same resolution there is a request to UNEP Executive Director to convene intergovernmental consultations with a view to reaching a common understanding between member states for the implementation of nature-based solutions. Therefore, Brazil requests the deletion of this reference in CRP 10, paragraph 3, on the third line after resilience to climate change. Then we would delete, including through nature-based solutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Brazil. I have also Argentina, and I would like to hear also reactions to suggestion of Brazil to delete that part. Argentina, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. We would like to support Brazil's recommendation to have the results of the contact groups that have not been agreed between brackets in the future. We have an incredibly big amount of documents coming out of these contact groups in these meetings, and it's getting increasingly hard for delegations to be able to track the changes. Regarding the other suggestion of Brazil on paragraph 3, we would support the deletion of the reference of including through nature-based solutions, as well as the footnote included there, in the understanding that further discussion needs to take place for having a common understanding between parties and governments on the full extent of this term. Thank you.
Thank you, Argentina. I'll give the floor to France, followed by South Africa and Egypt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, in the paragraph 3, we want to keep the reference to nature-based solution. Although, as we consider that we don't manage natural area soil, we want to delete the term as well as natural areas. And also in paragraph 4, in which there were a list of practices such as fire, crop monoculture, and so on, we want to bring it back in the document. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, France. I'll give the floor to South Africa, followed by Egypt and Costa Rica.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. South Africa would like to support the intervention that was made by Brazil and supported by Argentina to delete and include through nature-based solution, and noting that there is still a process that we need to follow as agreed by UNEA. Thank you.
Thank you, South Africa. I'll give the floor to Egypt, followed by Costa Rica and the UK.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Egypt, I think that the whole section 1, which is introduction, is properly made. However, we are not actually in favor of deleting this regarding the nature-based solution and as well as resilience to climate change, because this is a fact. At the same time, it has been approved by UNEA at the last time. Perhaps paragraph 4 regarding the practices that already mentioned now, I think it is feasible. We can put them back again to the original text. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Egypt. I see the list of speakers is growing and growing. So I believe by the moment we should leave this expression of including through nature-based solutions in brackets. I mean, so if your interventions are on this line on one side or the other, so we can avoid that and to save time and to move into different sections. So I invite not to take the floor if it's to repeat this point. So I'll give the floor now. Thank you very much. Now the list has been reduced significantly. I'll give the floor to Costa Rica, followed by Paraguay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And sorry, I just didn't have to delete myself from the list, but I just wanted to support the use of nature-based solutions. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Costa Rica. Ahora
Thank you very much, Costa Rica.
Gracias. Sorry. Sure. For us, if the suggestion by France of bringing back the list would be included, we would request that that is also in brackets. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Paraguay.
Thank you very much. Paraguay, says the speaker. So we would have two square brackets. One would be on the expression including through nature-based solutions, and the insertion in paragraph 4 suggested by France, which would also be in square brackets. I hope we're not going to add more square brackets to the COP If we can't solve this here, let's not forget that this is extra work for the COP in Kunming.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Japan would like to echo the previous speakers thanking all hard workers behind the scene. I think that this is a tremendous advancement of the work. Regarding the nature of this document, I really appreciate the Chair's statement about voluntary nature. This is really the main part which really we would like to support. As regards this document as a whole, I believe the collaboratory efforts made by FAO particularly, as well as other organizations, should be highly appreciated to reach this stage. I wonder if how we can put the acknowledgement of this kind of valuable work. Of course, we had a discussion on the cooperation yesterday in talking about other international instruments or agreements. I wonder how we can more specifically do that for this particular work. Of course, we can find a lot of places the name of FAO, but I don't really feel we are doing the appreciation clearly. So just for your consideration. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Japan. I think probably we can try what you mentioned when we go to the recommendations part as an active, certainly it's good for this collaboration on soils that is essential for biodiversity and for food. And this is part of all these mainstreaming efforts to expand this influence of our convention in all sectors. I don't have more requests to the floor, so we will leave section 1 with these 2 brackets, and now invite for comments on, sorry, should I go? We don't have that NGO. No? Sorry? Should I go? The first section is without these changes. Oh, I've been mentioned that there's a remote request from Bolivia. Bolivia, you have the floor. Bolivia, you have the floor on remote connection. Seems there is no connection with Bolivia.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we do, Bolivia. Go ahead. Adelante, Bolivia.
Please go ahead, Bolivia.
I want also to join and to support the removal of the nature-based solutions, but also I want to say that there are different alternatives to address holistically the sustainable use of soil, such as the Mother Earth-based actions that we also have important decision support the Mother Earth actions, but I prefer removing the nature-based solution. Regarding the third line, there is an issue that is of great concern of the Bolivian delegation, which are related to the carbon storage concepts and articulation of soils with climate change. So that's why after resilience to climate change in the third line, we want to introduce in this text clearly the mention to preventing and avoiding the implementation of soil mitigation approaches and practices on indigenous peoples and local communities. And this is because, well, we cannot move the burden for solving the climate crisis to indigenous peoples and local communities, since there are clear historical responsibilities in the context of climate change regarding this. So for Bolivia, it's unacceptable to shift the burden of the climate crisis to the most marginalized and vulnerable people in the world, such as indigenous peoples and local communities. So we suggest to introduce this wording before resilience to climate change. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Bolivia. Can you please repeat the insertion you are proposing? And I also invite not to give statements, better to use our time with the specific amendments to the text. I thought we already had an agreement on few changes in section 1. So, por favor, Bolivia.
Please, Bolivia, could you repeat the language you would like to include in this paragraph? And at dictation speed, please.
Line after resilience to climate change, comma, while preventing and avoiding the implementation of soil mitigation approaches and practices on indigenous peoples and local communities, comma. That's it, Chair. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Bolivia.
Thank you very much, Bolivia. Do we agree with the language suggested by Bolivia? If we do agree, we can leave it there. Or would someone like to put some square brackets around it? And I hasten to add, I hope that's not the case.
Proposed by the UK, Bolivia. I see the UK. UK have the floor, followed by Algeria.
Thank you, Chair. And just reflecting on that new suggested language from Bolivia, I think we struggle really to understand what it means, and without kind of further understanding, I think at this stage we would have to ask for that to be put in brackets, I'm afraid. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, UK. I'll give the floor to Algeria.
Algeria joins the statement made by South Africa on behalf of the African group. We believe that the process of defining will be done at the annual session at the General Assembly, and nature-based decisions would become a systemic way of approaching the matter. As a precaution, thank you.
Thank you, Algeria. I have two observers requesting the floor. Just one, NGO 700. And what I like to do is to adopt the section 1 with the few amendments in brackets and to move on. So NGO 700, you have the floor.
Muchas gracias. Sí.
Thank you, Chair. Based on the Brazilian and Argentinian statements and in accord with what was said by Bolivia, we would like to leave apart this expression of nature-based solutions and will prefer to use the expression ecosystem approach and otherwise retain the language of this paragraph, this section.
Muchas gracias, Abbas. Is there any support from parties to not only to have in brackets, but also to include the text suggests on ecosystem approach? Is there any support? I don't see any party. Yes, India. So we include in brackets and the reference to ecosystem approach. And with that, we adopt section 1 of the document. Let's move to section 2. So I open the floor for comments on section 2. I have Finland, followed by the UK and Brazil.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a general comment, which I think is in line with Japan's comment. This is an excellent work that has been done. And we only have 2 minor comments to the whole document. So I also would like to say that we should encourage to now go forward with this and not be bogged down with details which will not change the word. So just to say that full support for this, and we are coming in with 2 technical comments, and that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Finland, for the support and to keep the spirit to make progress and keep the momentum of collaboration on this important matter. I'll give the floor to France, followed by UK and Brazil.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In this section 2, concerning paragraph E, the part that is at the end, towards the end,
Nous souhaiterions la...
would like to suppress intensification, this word, delete it. We would like also to delete and ecological intensification. Thank you.
Thank you, France. Now I'll give the floor to the UK, followed by Brazil and Argentina.
Thank you, Chair. And like Finland, we support this plan and have very few comments to make on it. However, in paragraph E, 11E, there is an alternative formulation, and I assume you want some guidance from the floor in relation to which of these parties prefer. And I think our preference is for the second formulation, E-alt. We're happy with that. And I think we can accept the changes from France also. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, UK. So you prefer the alt version, but also support the amendment of France. Now I give the floor to Brazil, followed by Argentina and Colombia.
Thank you. Regarding E-alt, if you move to this paragraph, Brazil would request the deletion of the last sentence of such as agroecology and ecological intensification, because we don't see the need to single out any specific practices, since you're already referring to sustainable agricultural practices. So we either mention all the sustainable practices or we don't single out any one. And Brazil would prefer to use sustainable intensification. That's the concept used in the FAO. Thank you.
Thank you, Brazil. I see that you also support version E-alt without the last line. No particular examples, such as agroecology and ecological intensification, if I hear you well. Now I give the floor to Argentina, followed by Colombia and Egypt.
Thank you, Chair. We have one change in paragraph 9 in line number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, where it says, and towards the assessment and monitoring, we had suggested to include at the corresponding level. This also goes in paragraph 10, line 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. after monitoring and assessment at the corresponding level. And this is basically because, as we know, soil biodiversity is under national sovereignty in many cases, so we have to be very clear where monitoring and assessment should take place. Regarding the discussion on subparagraph 11E or 11 alt, we would support 11E alt, and we strongly support the inclusion of such as agroecology and sustainable intensification. If I may remind the delegation that opposed this term, ecological intensification is not a term that is defined, but on the other hand, sustainable intensification has a long tradition in the recent years in our discussions at the multilateral level. In particular, the IPBES assessment, the global assessment of 2019 in chapter 2.2.7.11, page 263, defines sustainable intensification. And this is also included in the land degradation assessment of 2018. So we strongly support this. Alternatively, we could refer, for example, to sustainable agricultural practices, such as identified by IPBES. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Argentina. Y gracias por hacer.
I thank Argentina and thank you for this clarification concerning specific work including IPES. Now I'm giving the floor to Colombia and then followed by Egypt and Costa Rica.
Thank you, Chair. We would just suggest one minor change in paragraph 11A, where it says in the line 3 or 4, agricultural producers, we would propose to replace by all relevant productive sectors, since we consider this should have a broader scope in the reference. And regarding the discussion of paragraph 11E, we also agree that E-alt version would fit more appropriately and even would support the recent mention and clearance of Argentina regarding the last part. So we could also support the use of that concept according to IPES. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Colombia.
I thank you, Colombia.
I'll give the floor to Egypt, Costa Rica, and remote connection from Bolivia. Egypt, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No harm if you remove agri-ecological, but certainly we should retain sustainable anticipation approaches. That will be much, much better because not everybody knows the terminologies as such. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Egypt. Seems a lot of support to E-alt with amendments. So I'm wondering if some delegations still want to keep original E, or we can work around E-alt only, or we keep both. You know, as many brackets we include, we will face this again on the L document later in this meeting or to the COP. Do we want to move forward? Meanwhile, I'll give the floor to Costa Rica, followed by Bolivia in a remote way, and Switzerland. Costa Rica tiene la palabra.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a minor inclusion in this section. We would like to include in paragraph 10, after formally promote sustainable soil management practices, the phrase including artisanal forms of agri-food production. This to recognize the role and contribution of indigenous people, local communities, and small producers in sustainable agri-food production. Thank you very much.
Por favor, puede.
Could you kindly repeat your proposal, indicating the line and place where the insertion should come in.
Claro, es
Sure. Paragraph 10, 8th line. Page 3, after promote sustainable soil management practices, we would add or include, including artisanal forms of food production. And then it will go on that can enhance soil biodiversity while maintaining the productivity of managed ecosystems.
¿Lo lograron capturar?
Could you get it? Yes, thank you, Costa Rica. As you can...
Two insertions into paragraph 10 that I hope there are no requests for brackets on this, so we can include it clean for the next time we see this document as an L. And I'll give the floor to Bolivia in a remote mode, followed by Switzerland and Zimbabwe. And I see that the list of speakers is growing, so let's see if we can close if there are no more, or there are reiterations, if we can move forward. So, Bolivia tiene la palabra.
Bolivia has the floor.
Well, Bolivia supports the 11E alt paragraph with we want to keep the agroecology concept and to delete the ecological intensification. We understand that the agroecology, it is completely biodiversity based, and the CBD is the guardian of biodiversity, and this is a very well-defined concept by the FAO, so we want to keep in the text agroecology. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Bolivia.
Thank you, Bolivia.
Floor to Switzerland, followed by Zimbabwe and Jordan.
Thank you very much, Co-Chair. My proposal also goes to the para 11E. We prefer the E-alt. We have difficulties with the term sustainable identification. So our proposal would be following also the intervention made by Argentina to say at the end, such as agroecology and other sustainable agricultural practices in line with recommendations by IPBES. Thank you.
Thank you, Switzerland. I'll give the floor to Zimbabwe, followed by Jordan and Brazil.
Thank you, Chair. On item paragraph 11E, would go with E out and also edit the last sentence, preferably to end at agricultural practices, because those examples are only examples of some of the agricultural practices. So we can still end at agricultural practices, but we are still open to suggestions by Argentina. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Zimbabwe. Colleagues, it seems like in this section, we'll have brackets on E-alt and on E, and some insertions in paragraph 9 and 10 that I don't believe they have brackets. So my suggestion is to leave it like that and to move forward unless you have something else to add. I mean, I'm hearing many comments on the same paragraphs. I see preference to keep E-alt by at least Argentina, Colombia, Brazil, Bolivia, Switzerland, and I mean, if you want to include your name in the list, but we can use our time in a better way. That's my humble proposal, if we can reduce the list. Meanwhile, I have Jordan, followed by Brazil and Malaysia.
Thank you very much, sir. Since I'm taking the floor for the first time, we would like to congratulate you for assuming the chairmanship of this group, and we are confident that you will wisely guide our deliberations. We also would like to congratulate the Secretariat for those important documents, and we thank the Government of Switzerland for hosting this meeting. I shall be very brief now, sir. We are now talking about Article 11H, and we agree to sustainable intensification. We prefer the alternative and with the agricultural practices. I thank you, sir.
Thank you, Jordan. I'll give the floor to Brazil, followed by Malaysia and New Zealand.
Thank you. I apologize for taking the floor again, but I skipped an insertion on paragraph 10, the second line. After to foster coordinated action 2, we would include invest in soil biodiversity assessment at the global level, comma, to safeguard, because there is a deep gap of knowledge and research among developed and developing countries and different areas of the globe. So we think it's important to recognize this gap and to take action on this at the global level. Thank you.
Thank you, Brazil, for that insertion. I'll give the floor to Malaysia, followed by New Zealand and Peru.
Thank you, Chair. Just a short one. Similarly to Zimbabwe and a few others, we support a ALT, but to delete the such as agroecology and ecological intensification at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Malaysia. Secretary is taking note of all changes. Even we have EL in brackets. Some are not asking for examples. Some others are requesting again to make explicit those examples. So let's see what Secretary can propose for the L version. Now I'll give the floor to New Zealand, followed by Peru and Paraguay.
Thank you, Chair, and I appreciate the direction you're trying to take us in here. In line with Zimbabwe, Malaysia, and I think Brazil, we support EALT, and looking at that last line, this is a familiar debate, both here and elsewhere, and when we put such as, or we list specific types of sustainable agricultural practices, we create a hierarchy. So it is easier to simply stop at agricultural practices so that it encompasses all types. Thank you.
Thank you, New Zealand. I hope we can exhaust the list with Peru, followed by Paraguay, Argentina, and Saudi Arabia, and then to move on. Perú tiene la palabra.
Peru has the floor. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. We quite agree with all the work that has been done by the Secretariat, FAO, and the World Network for Soils. And we're happy with EALT as it is. Thank you.
Gracias, Perú.
Thank you, Peru.
Paraguay tiene la palabra, seguido de Argentina y Arabia Saudita.
Paraguay has the floor, followed by Argentina and Saudi Arabia. Thank you, Chair. To be brief, we quite coincide with what was said by our colleague from New Zealand. If we would start to list all the preferences by individual delegations, we won't end up with an agreed text. We would prefer a simpler text and stop before the examples. If we take EALT, we would need to use the ecological intensification because this is an internationally agreed term. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to advance, to make progress. Now, a procedural issue, if I may, Chair, would like to suggest, please, all the additions to text would be marked but as changes, so that, of course, the brackets can easily visible, but if we have new additions now made in this room, please, we would like the Secretary to indicate all the changes. Thank you.
Gracias, Paraguay.
Thank you, Paraguay. We will make an effort so that these changes are marked, but normally when texts are agreed on in the room, these texts are left clean, and only in case of disagreement there are indications of changes with brackets. But we'll make every effort to clarify the situation. Now, I give the floor Argentina, followed by Saudi Arabia, and then Sudan.
Gracias.
I thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to very briefly support the proposal by New Zealand, supported by Paraguay. I think this is the way forward. Otherwise, we get bogged in this discussion about what was discussed by IPES or FAO, etc. Thank you. Thank you, Argentina. Saudi Arabia, and the last on the list is Sudan.
Thank you, sir, for this opportunity. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia supports the alt paragraph under paragraph 11, but we would also like to indicate a point also strengthening the rights of women and small holders so that they would have a better opportunity and a greater role in the preservation of biodiversity. I thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Now, last speaker, Sudan.
Thank you, sir. Sudan supports the alt paragraph, and we also support the sustainable agricultural practices. I thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Sudan. Just hold on a few seconds. Given the strong support to EALT version, can we agree to delete original E and to work with the amended version of EALT? Is there anyone opposing to deletion of original E? Please raise your hand. If not, we will proceed for the L version with trying to find the best formulation. Less is more for the L version, so we can try with the Secretariat to have a better language. So I see no objections. Thank you very much. And what we can do is adopt this section 2 with the amendments on paragraph 9, paragraph 10, and paragraph 11E alt. Then this section is adopted. Let's move to section 3 on scope and principles. Now I open the floor for comments on section 3. Argentina, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. On paragraph 15, it is mentioned the Paris Agreement. We would like there to have also the name of the Framework Convention, so to read the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change and its Paris Agreement. And then on paragraph 17, we would like to propose the same amendment that was included in the previous section on paragraph 17, line 3, after monitoring and assessment at the corresponding level. Thank you.
Thank you, Argentina. I don't see any more requests from the floor on comments on section 3. Ghana. Almost. Ghana followed by Brazil and Costa Rica.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Ghana wishes to comment on paragraph 13, the first line, which defines the scope and the area of coverage. During the contact group meeting, Ghana brought out the fact that the issue of soils when it comes to aquaculture is missing. in the whole document. Aquaculture is a special side of agriculture, and therefore Ghana expects proper attention in that area. Mr. Chairman, there are certain types of fish that feed on the detritus found in the soils in these ecosystems. And therefore, such type of soils are very important in agriculture. And so provision should be made in the scope, at least, to give the idea that those type of soils are covered by this document. Thank you very much.
But do you have a specific language to include?
Sure.
Can you say, please, where exactly it should be?
We will come out with a language for that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And again, I invite you to go straight to the points, and happy birthday, my friend. So now I'll give the floor to Brazil, followed by Costa Rica.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm always confused with this assumption shared not only by you, but other chairs and co-leads that just because you have tests in front of us, it's agreed tests and we should moving forward, making progress as simply agreeing to tests. I think moving forward is negotiating and reaching common understanding. That's why we're here, to talk to each other and reach a common understanding for future work. So I appreciate the opportunity to continue talking, and that's moving forward in our sense. I would like also to highlight the comment made by the delegate from Paraguay. There is a proliferation of documents, non-papers from co-leads and so on. It's really difficult to keep track of. It's even difficult to know that we're actually talking about the same documents. We had this before in one of the meetings. So it would be very much appreciated if some kind of track change could be incorporated in the test. I do understand your point of view from inserting brackets to give an idea that they are not, that there are no agreements, but some kind of track change is very important, and it makes it easier. We are more comfortable here discussing testing because we are more aware of what are discussing, what are the main points, and so on. So I also would like to support the comments made by Argentina just before me, and on paragraph 15, we would like to ask to an insertion in the third line after Paris Agreement that would say, and UNCCD land degradation neutrality targets. Thank you.
Thank you, Brazil. So we take into account your insertion on paragraph 15. And I have seen that there is no opposition to the insertions to UNFCCC and UNCCD on this paragraph, and also on paragraph 17. And we'll take into account your comment, Brazil, to make it more explicit. And we have Costa Rica, followed by Norway and Bolivia from a remote way. So Costa Rica tiene la palabra.
Costa Rica, please. Thank you very much, Chair. We would like to offer a comment on paragraph 19, second line, where it says, with other FAO-related activities, we would like to include, including the International Network of Soil Biodiversity and Global Soil Biodiversity Observatory to monitor and broadcast, etc.
Your insertion, because Secretariat had some difficulties to follow, please.
Claro.
Indeed. Paragraph 19, second line, after other FAO-related activities in the middle, include the following.
The International Network on Soil Biodiversity and the Global Soil Biodiversity Observatory to monitor and forecast the condition of soil biodiversity and soil health.
Thank you very much. You got it, right? So you don't have it yet. Do you want me? Yeah. Costa Rica.
Costa Rica, could you repeat it? However, dictation speed, please, especially when you're referring to specific text, because it wasn't possible to get the entire text on the side of the Secretariat. Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Is it clear, though? No, in fact, I'm asking you to repeat the text that you would like to include. Fine. Paragraph 19, second line. Immediately after other FAO-related activities, include the following text.
Including the International Network on Soil Biodiversity, and the Global Soil Biodiversity Observatory, to monitor and forecast the condition of soil biodiversity and soil health.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Costa Rica. I would now like to turn to Bolivia remotely, followed by Norway and then Algeria.
Thank you very much, Chair. My intervention was just to support the proposals of Brazil and Argentina in particular, to include the reference to the UNFCCC regarding the Paris Agreement. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Bolivia. Now, Norway, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry to have to bring us back a little bit. I had indicated earlier that we would like to speak, but I'd like to go back to paragraph 15 and to Argentina's proposal for the text. We would like to see in the text the wording UNFCCC and the Paris Agreement in order not to create some sort of hierarchy in the text using its agreement. Many thanks.
Thank you, Norway. I hope it's acceptable for Argentina, the mention. And so in this section, we have insertions on paragraph 15 that I don't believe nobody was against it. Also on paragraph 17, and another insertion on paragraph 19 by Costa Rica. The last speaker is Algeria, and then I would like to propose to move forward. Algeria, you have the floor.
Well, precisely. We wanted to support the proposal from Brazil about the inclusion here of the Desertification Convention so that we have synergy in the paragraph.
Thank you, Algeria. That's included. So with this, I propose to adopt section 3 on scope and principle as amended in paragraphs 15 and 19 and 17. Now we move to section 4 on global actions. I open the floor for comments on global actions. I see Guatemala.
Muchas gracias, señor.
Chair, thank you very much. Guatemala would like to make a specific proposal to paragraph F. Strengthen education and capacity building to use tools, for the use of tools to monitor soil by microdiversity and contribute to human, plant, and soil health. The phrase, in the use of tools, about the use of tools, should be included after capacity building.
Gracias, Guatemala.
Thank you, Guatemala.
Now I give the floor to Brazil, followed by Canada as last speaker.
Thank you. Brazil requests the deletion of letter E, as you've mentioned, in the contact group, because there are not enough indicators, and there are a huge gap of knowledge among parties. So our understanding that we should first have research and capacity building, and afterwards we could move to these indicators. Thank you.
Thank you, Brazil. So we put brackets there. I'll give the floor to Canada, followed by Argentina.
Thank you, Chair. Just a minor amendment that we propose under paragraph on subparagraph M, really to add prevent and address negative impacts of unsustainable farming practices, just to be clear about kind of the focus there. And in response to Brazil's proposal around paragraph E, would certainly support the need for additional research, but would also suggest that development and identification of feasible indicators will be important based on available information, and also that additional research will in fact lead to and support development and identification. So I think it's an additive rather than an either-or.
Last speaker in this section, Argentina. Tiene la palabra.
Please go ahead.
Gracias.
Thank you very much, Chair. Argentina speaking. In E, we could support the proposal from Brazil. Otherwise, our version would be to take out the last phrase that reads, and under the framework of the One Health concept. Take that out, because we don't know why we have to be specific about this in this particular subparagraph. Next, I would like to ask whether you could perhaps read for us the changes that were made in F. But before that, I wanted to ask for a change in M. We think it's drafted in a negative way. We wanted to turn this around and make it pro-positive. So we would suggest that it read as follows.
Good agricultural practices, including integral pest management in order to prevent and address negative impacts of fertilizers and pesticides to soil biodiversity. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much.
Gracias, Argentina.
Thank you, Argentina. Could you please repeat your proposal, indicating exactly, well, on the understanding that you are turning this into a positive approach, but please indicating exactly where the changes are to occur.
So the proposal would be in 20M to change for promote good agricultural practices, including integral pest management, in order to prevent and address negative impacts of fertilizers and pesticides to soil biodiversity. And the reasoning behind this is that we really think that we need a positive approach here in order to bring about the change that we're looking for. Thank you.
Gracias, Argentina.
Thank you, Argentina. So, in other words, you're talking about replacing M with your version. So it's an alternative which is drafted in a positive way. Fine, thank you. I see that the list of speakers is growing. I'd like to give the floor to the United Kingdom, followed by France and Zimbabwe, and then I'm going to make a proposal to try to stop this list from growing as fast as it is. UK, please.
Thank you, Chair. With regard to paragraph 11, not E, sorry, I think we don't really understand the rationale for deleting this, so we would like to retain it, perhaps with Canada's amendment, or retain it in brackets at the least. And on paragraph M, I think we could accept the proposal of Argentina to say the same thing, but perhaps in a more positive way. So we, I think, would be fairly content with their suggestion. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, UK. So you support M and you want to keep E. Now I'll give the floor to France, followed by Zimbabwe.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Chair. France supports the statements made by Canada and the UK, particularly on E about indicators. Thank you very much, sir.
Merci, La France. Now I give the floor to Zimbabwe, followed by Bolivia on remote.
Thank you, Chair. Reference to E, we don't have a problem of the sentence until the words system functions and services would seek deletion of reference to the framework of on One Health concept. It's a concept which is still being discussed under various biodiversity-related conventions, and I think we need to delete it. We still need to fully understand what it means. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Zimbabwe. So one option is to delete the whole paragraph, some support to keep it, and also there's an intermediate solution that maybe just delete the last part with the reference of One Health concept. Bolivia tiene la palabra, followed by...
Bolivia, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Well, we want to introduce at the very end of paragraph K, after management practices, while strengthening the systems of knowledge of indigenous peoples and local communities. Thank you.
Gracias, Bolivia. Puede volver.
Thank you, Bolivia. Could you repeat that, please?
While strengthening the systems of knowledge of indigenous peoples and local communities, at the very end of paragraph K.
Muchas gracias, Bolivia.
Many thanks, Bolivia.
Of 5 speakers more, and so far what we have in this section is brackets on E, on paragraph, yes, E, an amendment on K, and a new formulation from M. So I'm wondering if we can adopt, if we can approve those changes, and I'm not sure if the following interventions are repeating the same one or other position. If that is the case, we can agree with that. But meanwhile, I give the floor to Kenya, followed by Jordan and Malaysia.
Thank you, Chair. Kenya proposes to amend F to include strengthen education and research, and also proposes some changes on K to promote both ex situ and both in situ and ex situ conservation, noting that ex situ conservation for soil biodiversity, particularly microbial, has been neglected in many places. So we would like to emphasize both the in situ and ex situ. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, Kenya, you're suggesting 2 insertions, one in F for research, and can you repeat the second one, please? Microphone to Kenya, please.
So the second one is K, where we are including to promote both in situ and ex situ conservation. Thank you.
Thank you, Kenya. I believe there are no opposition to these inclusions from Kenya in these two paragraphs. I'll give the floor to Jordan, followed by Malaysia and Canada.
Microphone to Jordan. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Regarding paragraph E, we support the suggestion made by Brazil, as there aren't enough indicators for state parties, and therefore we support the deletion of such indicators, as we should give due attention to capacity building. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Canada. I invite you, if you are reiterating brackets that are already there, maybe we can move forward. So Malaysia followed by Canada and Saudi Arabia.
Thank you, Chair. We support Argentina on 20M, making it a more positive statement. But we also like to suggest an alternative word for 20A to change follow to adopt. And this will read, develop protocol, adopt harmonized methods, and so on. Thank you.
Malaysia, please, can you repeat again exactly the place and the text in dictation speed, please?
20A, it will read, develop protocols, adopt instead of follow, harmonized method, and use tools to collect and so forth.
Thank you. So it's to replace for adopt on 20A. Canada followed by Saudi Arabia and Cameroon.
Thank you, Chair. Regarding 20M, also support the more positive formulation of that as proposed by Argentina. Would prefer, however, to keep the scope broader and maintain the examples related to addressing fertilizer and pesticide use as examples, as opposed to the only potential areas where activities could be promoted.
Thank you, Canada. I'm sure. No, she wants to maintain the examples at the end. So building from the formulation from Canada to include the last part, including examples as they are on the last part of M. Now we give the floor to Cameroon, followed by Argentina.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Chair. Cameroon would like to support Brazil, the Brazil position about the indicators, and the Kenya wording about strengthening research. In other words, we think that in little f, instead of speaking only about the strengthening education and development, we believe that microdiversity of the soils is something that is not yet well known, so we have to strengthen research there. Now, in G, in the paragraph, in the line where we talk about the context of climate change, third line, we would like to add here degradation of soils in line with the Convention on Desertification and combating drought, because we want to try to align the three sister conventions, and for degradation of soils, Cameroon believes that it's also important that it should appear here at this particular point in the document. Thank you.
Thank you, Cameroon. I'll give the floor to Argentina, followed by Saudi Arabia.
Gracias, señor.
Thank you very much, Chair. Chair, I wanted to just react, if I may, to the proposal which aimed at changing A, replacing follow with adopt. From our perspective, to say that we're going to adopt harmonized methods, we would have to already have agreed what these methods are. So I think it's a little strong, this language, if we don't know exactly what we're referring to. Especially since we have the first part, which says develop protocols. So we would prefer to keep the original language. Develop protocols, follow harmonized methods. Next, I consulted about F. Now, I asked about F. I mentioned, I listened to what many speakers have said. Could you read out where we stand, what the status of F is, so that we can follow exactly where we are at this point? Thank you.
Secretary to mention amendments on this section.
So the little f reads as follows: strengthen education, research, and capacity building to use the tools to monitor soil microbiodiversity and contribute to human, plant, and soil health.
Thank you, Secretariat. I hope that is acceptable. And I will give the floor to Saudi Arabia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In 20, I suggest the encouragement of the stakeholders in the civil society instead of the current wording. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Holders and to delete our examples and then to become involved in the implementation of the plan of action? Is that what you're suggesting?
We suggest encourage the stakeholders in the civil societies instead of encourage non-state actors. So the suggestion is encourage civil society actors instead of non-state actors.
With this, I don't have any more requests in the floor, so I invite to approve section 4 as amended on subparagraphs A, E, F, G, I, K, and M. I have a request from IPLCs 243. Please be brief. I remind you that we need to deal with 4 documents before 1, and it's 2212. Go ahead, please.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Chairman. We have a proposal that would apply to I. If I can, we could add
authorities from indigenous and local communities. Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you very much.
Gracias. Esto sería.
Thank you. But where would it come? Would it come after other local authorities in the second line, or where would you like to include that text? If you could repeat the place, please.
Después de authority.
After the word authorities.
¿Puedes repetir el texto?
Could you repeat the text?
Those traditional authorities from indigenous and local communities.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you.
Presidente.
Is there any support to this insertion? Please raise your flag. I see Norway, so that's included there. Thank you very much. So with this, I invite to approve section 4. on global actions. It is approved. Now let's move to section 5 on key elements. So I open the floor for element 1. Paraguay, you have the floor. Tiene la palabra, followed by India.
Please go ahead, Paraguay, and India next. Thank you very much, Chair. In 1.5, at the end, where it says eliminate, phase out, or reform incentives, we would like to suggest the following.
Eliminate or reform with a view to phase out. Muchas gracias.
Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you very much.
By Ghana and France.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much, Chair. In paragraph 1.5 under element 1, that is policy coherence and mainstreaming, India again requests to reconsider deleting the word eliminate and keep the word phase out. India is aware that the word eliminate is already existing in IC targets, and therefore the post-2020 GBF should build on the progress made on IC biodiversity targets and developed a futuristic and realistic targets. Therefore, India requests to keep the word eliminate in brackets form. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Please repeat the insertion and exactly the line where these changes should include.
Therefore, India requests to keep the word eliminate in the bracket form. Should I read it once again?
Can you indicate us which paragraph are you referring?
In paragraph 1.5, under element 1, policy coherences and mainstreaming, India again requests to reconsider deleting the word eliminate. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, India. Now I'll give the floor to Ghana, followed by France and Switzerland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ghana wishes to comment on paragraph 21, the first line, which is the introduction. It reads, the plan of action comprises 4 main elements that could be undertaken as appropriate and on a voluntary basis by parties and governments. Ghana wishes to propose that we delete on and on voluntary basis. As appropriate is enough, and it connotes everything. Because Ghana feels that implementation could be compromised if we don't keep silent on voluntary basis. Elsewhere in the document, parties are encouraged even to report in their national reporting. And so if we maintain as appropriate, which could also connote on voluntary basis, there is no point emphasizing on voluntary basis to compromise the document. So let's be silent on that by deleting it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ghana, for your contribution. As you might remember, I mentioned in my introductory words for this document that to keep in mind that this is voluntary. But I'm in your hands. You are proposing this, so I would like to hear the reaction of the floor about it, to this proposal to delete this part on paragraph 21. Meanwhile, I see the list is growing. I'll give the floor to France, followed by Switzerland and Brazil.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. France would like to keep the term delete in 1.5 and would like to delete the terms distort trade and France, I repeat, France would like to delete this third end. Thank you.
So how the paragraph will sound? You want to keep the word eliminate that is being proposed to be deleted, and the second one, please, Franz.
Sorry. In para 1.5, France wants to delete distort trade and want to keep the word eliminate. Thank you.
Thank you, Franz. Give the floor to Switzerland, followed by Brazil and Chile.
Thank you very much, Chair. We have also a lot of difficulties with the distort trade. The reason is that this would create a kind of hierarchy between different processes. So we would also like to, I mean, the best would be to bracket the whole part, avoiding policy measures that would distort trade and create efficiencies. But the main word we don't like is distort trade. And we would like to keep the rest as it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Switzerland. Brazil, followed by Chile and Peru.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to highlight that for Brazil, it's of fundamental importance to have this reference to start trade and creating efficiency in order to align all the actions to multilateral agreed commitments that most, if not all the parties here have made in trade fora. So it's fundamental importance to be kept in here. In paragraph 1.8, Brazil would like to request an amendment. You would, after health diets, you would delete the comma, add and, so it will read nutritious, comma, delete and, health diets, delete comma, and pollutants exposure. Nutritious, comma, health diets and pollutants exposure. And then we'll delete the rest of the sentence. Thank you. Because pollutants are read, later we're explaining what they're pollutants, but they are all pollutants, so we don't need to single out any of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Brazil. It's clear it's nutritious, healthy diets and pollutants exposure, and to delete the last part with examples of pollutants. Thank you, Brazil. I see that the list is quite long, and I understand that paragraph 1.5, we have brackets because we've seen views in different sides. So if the following requests from the floor are to reiterate one side or the other, that paragraph will be in brackets. So I invite you to not to take the floor and to move on. Meanwhile, tiene la palabra Chile, seguida de...
Chile has the floor, followed by Peru and Argentina. Thank you, Chair. I'd like to refer to paragraph 1.5 in accordance with most recent instructions, but also following the discussion. In paragraph 111, I would like to add, after action plans and coordination at national and subnational level.
Improve public and private actions that strengthen soil biodiversity.
Could you please repeat this at dictation speed so that the Secretariat can take note?
At the national and subnational levels, in order to increase and improve public and private actions that strengthen soil biodiversity. ¿Está capturado?
Could you capture that?
Sí,
This is towards the end. Yes, after strategies and action plans. It's a bit too fast, and we cannot follow. Please, when you make textual proposals, please do it slowly so that we don't have to make 2 or 3 attempts. Yes, thank you. Now Peru, followed by Argentina. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Peru stresses the importance of the interrelationship between biodiversity and food security, especially in support of small agricultural such as family or household producers that stress genetic biodiversity with a special stress on the women's role. On the basis of arguments or rationality, in the section where activities by agricultural producers is mentioned, we would like to say with special emphasis on small producers, with special emphasis on the women's role in the production. And we're talking about local communities. We would like to eliminate the mention of women, to move this upper in the text to make special stress on the role played by women, and would like to support what was said by Ghana and Chile in the latest of Chile's statements. We're not in agreement with the elimination or deletion in 1.5. We're also not in agreement with the proposal to eliminate the distortion of trade. Could you please state again the proposed changes? As far as I can understand, it's in the 5th line when activities by farmers is mentioned, where you would like to insert the small farmers and the role of women, and you also propose to delete in the final lines where women are mentioned, because it has been already mentioned before. Could you repeat, please? Okay. After farmers, with emphasis on the small farmers and the role of women farmers. What is mentioned up in the text would be a repetition of what is mentioned down in the text. Thank you. Thank you, Peru. Argentina has the floor, followed by Ecuador and Belgium. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We would wish, above all, to express our opinion on bracketing the word eliminated. I think we shouldn't come backwards as the convention is concerned. We are not in a position to accept anything less ambitious than Target 3, Target 3. Now, concerning the proposal to eliminate would distort trade, it would be very important to include this language, and I don't believe that any of the parties doesn't have as a goal to distort trade. That is why we don't understand why should it be eliminated. We would encourage to reconsider this proposal to eliminate. We don't believe it would be our goal to distort trade. Thank you. So we don't accept. Thank you, Argentina. Now we see that paragraph 1.5 would contain a number of brackets, so there's no need to repeat. We have a rather long list, and we are approaching noon. Cameroon has the floor, followed by Belgium and the United Kingdom. I thank you, Mr. Chairman. Cameroon. Would like to speak about the opening text concerning the development of capacities and establishing of capacities. We would like to come back to a point that is our common point in a number of countries. We also believe it is important to integrate technology transfer as well as knowledge sharing. Otherwise, it would not be achieved. Thank you.
So, Cameroon, paragraph 21C, I guess. Can you confirm? Thank you so much. Now I'll give the floor to Belgium, followed by the UK and Australia.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'll try to be brief. I hope you appreciate that. On paragraph 21, the first line, the deletion by Ghana about and on a voluntary base, we'd rather not see that deleted. For us, the voluntary basis is not exactly a synonym of as appropriate, and I think it is wise repeating that this is on a voluntary basis. On paragraph 1.5, we simply support France. And on paragraph 1.8, we'd rather not have the deletion suggested by Brazil, suggesting to delete including pesticides, etc. We think the specification of these elements is quite important and helps us to understand what is being talked about here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Belgium, for being right to the point. Next is UK, followed by Australia and Congo.
Thank you, Chair. We can be brief. The only comment we were going to make here, recognizing the number of brackets that already exist, is that like Belgium in the opening chapeau to paragraph 21, we do not want to see the deletion of on a voluntary basis. That is an important principle or fundamental element of this plan, so we would want to see it retained. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, UK, Australia, followed by Congo and Japan.
Thank you, Chair. Look, I have the same comment, actually, as Belgium and UK. We would prefer to keep reference to voluntary basis in paragraph 21, notwithstanding your comment that the guidelines themselves are voluntary. This is very important to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Congo, followed by Japan and EU.
I thank you, Mr. Chairman, for giving me the floor. The Democratic Republic of Congo would like to make a proposal to add in the second line 1.5 that protects the cell productivity and help and favors soil biodiversity. Secondly, when it says that we would like to say reduces progressively or brings down progressively.
Please repeat again, you indicating which line or after which word, what text you want to include. We're not able to capture it.
Second line. That protect or increase soil biodiversity. Instead of increase, I would like to propose that helps increase soil biodiversity. And in the fourth line of the French text, that to say reduces progressively. Phase out.
Sorry, Karen, we're having problems to understand clearly how, maybe it's a language problem, but can you, I hope, I understand you're using the French version, so it's difficult for us to know exactly how we'll read in English. Otherwise, you can, when we finish, approach to Secretariat to clearly express what you want in this paragraph in order to save time. So I'll give the floor to Japan, followed by EU and Togo. Last speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Japan is also the country who has a strong interest on this paragraph 1.5, just as pointing out our interest. I'd like to share the general observation of mine with Mr. Chairman. There are many voices to add long text to the current ones. We have a lot of global issues like food security, climate change, trade, health, and others. But each time, if we put everything into one text, that would be degrade the real core points of that sentence. That's what I would be afraid. I love Indian spice. I like Korean pepper. I love Italian sauce, French dressing. But when I eat sushi, I do pick up only soy sauce. Thank you. And also, I'd like to share the views expressed by UK and Belgium colleagues about voluntary nature's text. That is really, really important to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Give the floor to EU and Togo, and please go straight to the soy sauce. Togo, you have the floor.
Okay, merci.
Thank you very much. Africa needs to revive all of its soils for agriculture, and to avoid confusion at the level of governments concerning the global biodiversity framework as has been mentioned by Ghana on behalf of the African group, we need to eliminate the words on voluntary basis, which is very important to avoid confusion concerning the implementation of the global framework. We should assure that that would be a challenge to all the countries so that all the 4 activities, as mentioned, are implemented. Togo also supports the Kenyan position that would like to add to technology transfer, and we would like to make a small addition concerning promotion and use of sustainable practices. We propose to say promote and use of good practices.
Togo, please, can you indicate where?
Cela va se répertorier sur les paragraphes
1.3, paragraph 1.3, and 1.9. Thank you.
Togo, please.
Togo, could
what changes in 1.3 and what changes in 1.9 you would like to include? We were not able to capture it.
porte sur le paragraphe.
In paragraph 1.3, promote the implementation of good sustainable practices of sustainable use of soils. In 1.9, to promote the implementation of sustainable soil management, we would like to add to promote the good practices of sustainable soil management, and at 1.9, to promote ways and means to overcome obstacles to the adoption of sustainable soil management. And we would also add to the adoption of good practices of sustainable soil management.
Thank you. Now give the floor to EU, followed by Poland.
Mr. Chair, we fully agree with the going directly to the soy sauce. And in the spirit of compromise, having heard different parties, including Argentina, on paragraph 1.5, we would like to make a last attempt to lift the bracket. And this would be to retain the wording as it is in Aichi Biodiversity Target 3, because we don't want to have less ambition than Aichi. And therefore, we would propose to replace distort trade by not be in harmony with the convention and other relevant international obligations, which cover trade, but cover also other instruments. And then we would also retain the wording of eliminate, phase out, or reform, as in Aichi Biodiversity Target 3. So the full paragraph would read as follows: promote policies that provide economic incentives for practices that protect or increase soil biodiversity, avoiding policy measures that would not be in harmony with the convention and other relevant international obligations, and create inefficiency, and eliminate, phase out, or reform incentives, including subsidies harmful to soil biodiversity, and then leave the bracket. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, EU. It sounds like a very nice formulation as a compromise. I'm wondering if we can accept that formulation. I see Brazil requesting for the floor. Please go ahead on this point. Microphone to Brazil, please.
Yes, this point. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, my colleague from the EU. This is a very good example of not wasting time and moving forward by talking to each other. That's all my delegation have been asked since the beginning of the sessions. And it's always good to recall agreed language, but if I recall well, before harmony, I think there was a word agreed that is, I think it's consistent and in harmony with. So if you want to recall and use agreed language, Brazil would be open to consider this language. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brazil. So it seems we have a good basis for reach an agreement on this paragraph. So we can include instead of not to be consistent is the suggestion from Brazil in harmony with the Commission, or you can have a quick conversation and send the text to Secretariat, and we will include in the L version of this document. Thank you very much. I would like to close, but I see that the list is growing, and colleagues, we have many elements and we have more documents, so I invite you to help me to move forward. And I also have a request from Bolivia on the remote part. Please help me. If you are asking the floor to support what we already mentioned, let me make a quick summary. We have one amendment on paragraph 21 regarding voluntary basis. We also have an insertion on the rationale. We have an insertion on 1.3, 1.5, 1.8, and 1.11. Those are the paragraphs with amendments for the document, and still 5 parties asking for the floor. So I invite you, if it's to reiterate what we already have, I invite you to move forward. Meanwhile, I give the floor to Paraguay, followed by Poland and Cote d'Ivoire.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are unfortunately not in a position to accept the EU's alternative language at this stage. We do need a specific reference, at least to WTO rules, when we speak of consistency. So not just all relevant international agreements. So either we keep the non-trade distorting part of the language, or we specifically add WTO rules after the convention. Thank you.
Thank you, Paraguay. We will then keep 1.5 and the alt version included for L. And I also invite you to do informal consultations. If you can also join the group, then probably you can reach a good agreement on this text to be included in the L version. I'll give the floor to Poland, followed by Bolivia. Poland, Cote d'Ivoire, and then Bolivia.
Thank you, Chair. I would be brief, very brief. Regarding para 21, voluntary basis, I would like to keep this wording because, as you can see, the title of the whole document, it is draft
we know
plan
that's in
of
brackets.
action for the international initiative, not for parties. So it should be voluntary. Thank you.
Thank you, Poland. Cote d'Ivoire, followed by Bolivia and Uganda.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you very much, Chair. Côte d'Ivoire supports the proposal from Ghana and Togo, which were very clearly expressed and which referred to the concerns of the African region as regards the restoration of the soil biodiversity. And as to the question of on a voluntary basis, that is problematic for us. Côte d'Ivoire on 1.4 would like to include in the final phrase traditional agricultural practices. Côte d'Ivoire would like to add there the word traditional sustainable agricultural practices. Traditional sustainable agricultural practices.
I have Bolivia, followed by Uganda and Argentina.
Thank you, Chair. Well, in the rationale, in the fifth line, we want to see the complete list of actors as it is in the paragraph 18. So after farmers, we want to introduce smallholders, small scale food producers, family farmers, peasants, and following with the others. And in this line also in the 1.9, we want to make a reference after the rights of indigenous peoples and local communities, comma, and the rights of peasants and other people working in rural areas, aligned to the resolution of the General Assembly, which has the same name. Thank you very much.
Gracias, Bolivia. ¿Puede repetir?
Thank you, Bolivia. I would like to ask you to repeat the second insertion.
In the rationale, after farmers, we want to introduce smallholders, comma, small scale food producers, comma, family farmers, comma, peasants. And the other insertion is in 1.9, after local communities, in the third line, the rights of peasants and other people working in rural areas, comma.
Muchas gracias, Bolivia.
Thank you, Bolivia. I now call on Argentina, followed by Uganda.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Chair, thank you. About paragraph 1.5, where the EU mentioned our reference to ICI, we also believe that with the proposal, or the addition rather, to better reflect goal 3 of Aichi by Brazil, we think that would be an appropriate compromise that would help us to resolve the issues in another paragraph. Thank you very much, Argentina. I think that we're getting close now to a good agreement to have this acceptable to everyone. And I would like to invite Paraguay to join in the following wording. The last one I have on my list now is Uganda. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. We have a suggestion on paragraph 1.13. Paragraph 1.13. We certainly recognize the need to identify sources of financial resources for the implementation of the action plan. But we're not sure that this specific paragraph, as articulated in 1.13, belongs in this section. This particular section is about actions related to policy coherence and mainstreaming, and yet the action of raising funds is for the whole action plan, not just for this element. So the suggestion we have is not just about the content or the substance of the paragraph, but about its location in the document. We would like, therefore, to propose that paragraph 1.13 be moved up front, perhaps in section 2 or section 3 of the document. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Uganda. I see your point. Let's see if we can find a better place for this paragraph. With this, I propose to approve element 1 with all the amendments mentioned. I see no objection. Let's move to element 2. I open the floor for comments on element 2, encouraging the use of sustainable soil management practices. Argentina?
Argentina speaking. Thank you very much, Chair. About 2.1, we have a suggestion, which is to change ecological intensification and replace it with sustainable intensification. But given that earlier we had reached an agreement about merely mentioning sustainable agricultural practices, we could follow the same example here and in the rest of the document, in fact, and we could take out the mention of the reference to examples because of redundance. In 2.2 now, we believe that it's not necessary to have this long list of 4 examples, 4 lines worth. It begins with after longer term effects and goes all the way down to enhanced conservation. We suggest that that entire list of examples be taken out in the same 2.2 after science-based risk assessment procedures. We don't understand the need to have as appropriate in there, because from our perspective, the science-based risk assessment procedures are always appropriate. Next, if I may, in 2.4, the same logic applies to the examples. We don't understand why we have to have this extremely long list here, which will certainly lead us to putting in square brackets here and there if we don't take out this long list. Finally, in 2.7, we do not believe it is appropriate to have the phrase between commas which reads, particularly those with high amounts of biological diversity or agricultural suitability. Because our understanding is that in many cases, restoration and conservation of soils is necessary in countries that are perhaps not particularly countries where there is a great diversity, biological diversity. It is precisely in those countries where this action would be necessary, and we would be limiting it here. So we propose that we take out what I said, what I read out, particularly those with high amounts of biological diversity or agricultural suitability, between commas, to take that out. The Chair, thank you very much, Argentina. In my version, it is not in commas, but I understand that you want to take out the phrase, particularly those with high amounts of biological diversity or agricultural suitability. And the other amendments that you made to 2.1. Thank you very much. I now give the floor to Paraguay and then Brazil.
Gracias, Presidente.
Thank you, Chair. Well, in line with what was just said by Argentina in 2.1 and 2.4, we had similar comments to add sustainable intensification, but if we are going to talk about a simplification of the text, as we said earlier, we could follow that approach in those places. Specifically in 2.2, after the reference to risk analysis, we would also agree to take out as appropriate and add the next sentence. I'm going to read it out as slowly as possible.
With risk assessment techniques developed by the relevant international organizations. Muchas gracias.
¿En qué parte es?
Where would that come? I'm sorry. After risk assessment in 2.2.
Paraguay.
Thank you, Paraguay.
Brazil.
I now call on Brazil.
And Ghana.
Thank you. My delegation full aligns with the statement made by Argentina and will support their proposals. We would also like to highlight that in the paragraph 2.1 there is a footnote with a series of examples of those practices. That therefore our suggestion is to either bring the footnote inside the paragraph, what is not our preference, or to delete the reference to agroecology and ecological intensification. And on paragraph 2.4, we'd have an addition at the end of that paragraph after terraces. It would read, recognizing the wide range of approaches to enhance the sustainability of agricultural systems, Those are my comments. Thank you.
Brazil, can you repeat the last part? Is the recognition of the wide range of approaches, and I was lost after.
Sure. Recognizing the wide range of approaches to enhance the sustainability of agriculture systems. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll give the floor to Ghana, followed by Peru.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ghana wishes to propose the inclusion of the term information in the first line of paragraph 2.3 before policies to read facilitate for all relevant stakeholders access to information, policies, and then the rest follow. Huge amount of information is locked up in research and academia, and access is not that smooth. Ghana is therefore happy that in the fourth line, research bodies is captured. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ghana. And last speaker, Peru. Tiene la palabra.
You have the floor, Peru. Thank you very much, Chair. On paragraph 2.1, Peru agrees with its language as it stands. Same for 2.2. We would not like the details that are being described be taken out. We do not believe they should be deleted because we're working, and this initiative, this work plan about soil biodiversity is something which is absolutely necessary in order to be able to fulfill many of the activities that are going to take place within the post-2020 GBF. So we think that as they are worded, because they have been checked in our countries, that they should stay unchanged. Thank you, Chair.
Element 2, with amendments on 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, 2.4, and 2.7. So this section is approved. Let's move. I'll give the floor to comments on element 3 on awareness raising, sharing of knowledge, and capacity building. Cameroon. Sorry, I oversee that Bolivia was requesting for the floor from the online connection. Apologies, my mistake. Bolivia tiene la palabra.
Bolivia, you have the floor. We're still on element 2.
Yes, I have some proposal for the element 2 in paragraph 2.10. At the very end of this paragraph, I want to introduce the following wording. While preventing and avoiding the implementation of approaches and practices of soil mitigation to climate change in indigenous peoples and local communities, small-scale food producers, and peasants. And I want to repeat this wording in the following paragraph 2.11. Thank you very much, Chair.
Gracias.
Thank you, Bolivia.
Invite the room to approve also these two insertions. I'd like for you to raise your hand if you agree, and then to move on section 3. So if I see no objections to the last two amendments from Bolivia, I see the UK, so we'll keep this in brackets. Thank you. Now I open again the floor for comments on element 3. So we have Cameroon followed by Seychelles.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Chairman. But when I asked for the floor, in fact, it was about 2.2, so I'm terribly sorry to ask you to come back to 2.2. We have a proposal. There was a mention of improving and putting on a regular basis scientific risk assessment procedures, develop, enhance, and implement science-based risk assessment procedures. We wanted to mention the business of synthetic fertilizers. It has been shown that synthetic fertilizers have a negative effect, a deleterious effect on soil biodiversity. We'd like to mention this to talk about reducing the production and use of synthesized or synthetic fertilizers. Thank you.
Cameron, please let us know exactly where you want this insertion. I am very worried that we're very behind our schedule. Only one document not finished. We want to do 4, so next sessions will be we need to be much more efficient. So please indicate where exactly and what words do you want in this paragraph regarding synthetic fertilizers.
Merci.
Thank you. 2.2 is already a bit longer than the others. It might be good here to insert one item where we mention solely the reduction of the production of the use of synthetic fertilizers, because the other paragraph mentions the enhancement and implementation of science-based procedures. But this is a fact that I think we need to highlight.
Merci.
Thank you.
Secretary will try to include this concern, but I invite you to go straight to the soy sauce, please. Again, so Secretary will try to put this on the L version. So Seychelles followed by Argentina on 3.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Seychelles have a proposed amendment for point 3.10. We agree that promoting access to the latest technologies and molecular tools for soil biodiversity assessment and monitoring in developing countries is crucial. However, there is an urgency to also advance agriculture technologies in these countries as well. As a small island state, we are still using conventional technologies on very limited land. There is a need for agricultural technologies that promote higher yields by using less space. We also need technologies that moves away from the use of soil, as this is the best way to ensure soil biodiversity conservation. So Seychelles proposes that modern soilless agriculture is inserted, and the statement reads, foster scientific and technical cooperation to promote access to the latest technologies and molecular tools for modern soilless agriculture, soil biodiversity assessment, and monitoring in developing countries.
Thank you, Seychelles. I invite you to give less context and go straight to amendments. I'll give the floor to Argentina, followed by Australia.
Thank you, Chair. I have no particular comments on element 3, just a procedural concern. I would like to ask the delegations that once we have approved the section, let's try not to go back to it. We would like to go through all the documents that we had for this session today. Thank you.
Thank you for your support, Argentina. Australia followed by Belarus.
Thank you, Chair, and apologies for coming back very quickly on Section 2. I just wanted to refer to Cameroon's proposal on synthetic fertilisers in paragraph 2.2, and just wanted to clarify that the Secretariat, and ask that the Secretariat do include that proposal in square brackets, because I wasn't quite able to follow the exact wording. Thank you.
It'll be like that. Thank you. Belarus.
Спасибо.
I thank you, Mr. Chairman. We would like to propose to insert in paragraph 10.3 at the very end with words "and in transition economy countries" or countries with transition economies. Thank you.
Thank you. Sri Lanka.
Thank you, Chair. Sri Lanka proposed inclusion of word share to 3.8. So that text should read as follows: compile, protect, maintain, promote and share traditional knowledge.
Thank you very much. And Chair, I have no more requests from the floor, so I propose to approve this document. Ghana, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In paragraphs 3.1, 3.2, 3.3, where it reads increased understanding of the role of soil biodiversity, increased the understanding of the consequences of soil biodiversity decline, strengthen the understanding. Ghana wishes to include the term increase the understanding and appreciation of. Ghana finds essence in this because, yes, as a policymaker, I understand the role of soil biodiversity. And so what? Do I appreciate? So will I make provision for it? Yes, I understand the consequences of soil biodiversity decline as a policymaker. And so what? If I don't appreciate, will I make provision for that?
So, Ghana, you want to include an appreciation on the 3 paragraphs?
Sure.
Thank you. I give the floor to Australia.
Thank you, Chair. Just very quickly wanted to flag that we do not agree with the proposal just raised before to include and share in paragraphs 3.8, just making the comment that it's not always appropriate to share traditional knowledge. Thank you.
Thank you. It'll be in brackets. And now Argentina followed by Colombia.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to mention that we do not agree with the inclusion in 310 of and countries in economic transitions because it is not text that is present in the wording of the convention.
Thank you very much. I invite you to keep this simple. Less is more. If we start putting lists, we're going to, by default, omit something. So let's go back to the principles and to see, we want to work on this global action plan, right? Colombia followed by Uganda.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We agree completely with you, and in that sense, I would support the comment made by my colleague from Argentina. We would rather keep in 3.10 the original reference to developing countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to see if we can take out this reference by the proposal. Belarus, so we can treat everyone in the same way on an equal basis. So I look for the indulgence of Belarus. So we can move on. Microphone to Belarus, or do you want to keep that phrase in brackets and we move on? Is Belarus in the room?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I then would propose that my proposal would be bracketed.
Thank you. We'll keep it in brackets. Now I'll give the floor to Uganda, followed by Serbia.
Thank you, Chair. With regard to Section 3, looking through all the paragraphs of that section, we feel that there is an element that's missing and needs to be incorporated in the section, and that is the understanding the drivers of soil biodiversity loss. When you go through, there is reference to understanding the consequences of declining soil biodiversity or the role of soil biodiversity, but not necessarily the drivers of this loss or decline. I don't have the proposal for the text that would be incorporated in there, but it's an element that's missing, and therefore would request that it be brought into the picture in this section. Thank you, Chair.
It's difficult to include at this stage text like that if we don't have clarity. So I invite you to make very precise amendments to the text. You are raising a concern, but I invite you to have a concrete language, or maybe to work on the secretariat, and whatever you can offer, we can put it in brackets. But we are extending the work on this document for the next session and so on. Then I have the floor of Serbia, which I believe is to support Belarus, and the understanding that this will be keep on brackets. Serbia, quick.
Thank you, Chair. You're right that we would like to support Belarus through all documents we introduced at the COP6, all phrase eligible status parties. And please pay attention to all documents which exist as a frame of CBD process, and it is not only CBD document as a convention, but all decisions through all COPs are obligatory part, and please respect all eligible status. Developing countries, small island countries, and countries with economy in transition. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Still more parties requesting for the floor. So it's Cameroon, followed by Côte d'Ivoire.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Le Cameroun.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Cameroon would like to come back to the addition at the opening text concerning technology transfer. And I'd like to come back to paragraph 3.10. To say to encourage technical and technological cooperation and transfer of technology in order to promote access to technology. Now in 3.10 we could add transfer of technology after cooperation, technical cooperation and transfer of technology.
Thank you, Cameroon. Now I'll give the floor to Côte d'Ivoire.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. La Côte d'Ivoire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Côte d'Ivoire supports Cameroon's proposal. We also support the expression of concern by Uganda, and we would like to propose on 3.2 to simply say to increase understanding of the causes and consequences of soil biodiversity decline. So, causes and consequences.
Thank you very much. I don't have more requests to the floor, so I invite the floor to approve element 3 with amendments in 3.1, 3.2, 3.3, 3.8, and 3.10. So this element 3 is approved. Now I open the floor for comments on element 4, research and monitoring and assessment. We have literally more than 10 minutes. I see Norway.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. In the previous version, point 4.13, which was deleted after the suggestion of a party, read, encourage and support the development of community-based monitoring and information systems or simplified assessment methodologies and tools for measuring soil biodiversity that are directly accessible in all regions of the world. Norway would like to retain this element. We believe these types of initiatives are extremely useful and that we have only seen the tip of the iceberg in terms of their potential to improve the implementation of the convention. Thank you.
Thank you, Norway. Secretary identified that text will be sent back to the next version. I'll give the floor to Brazil, followed by Argentina and Paraguay.
Thank you. In paragraph 4.4, we have an amendment to this paragraph. So in the second line, after practices, we would add, comma, biological pest control, comma, reverse logistics for pesticide packaging, and the application of biological inputs, comma, as they interact, and then we delete directly with functions and services provided by soil biodiversity, full stop, delete the rest of the paragraph. And on paragraph 4.14, we would add sustainable before soil, so you'd read capacity building on sustainable soil management practices. Then we delete what is between commas, including agroecological and other biodiversity-friendly management practices, so you can encompass all sustainable practices. I hope it's clear. Thank you.
Can you repeat the first one?
The very last one, well, okay, the first one, and I have questions on the last one. So if you can repeat all over again, please.
Okay, so in the first one, it starts with promote, goes until practices, comma, biological pest control, comma, reverse logistics for pesticide packaging, and the application of biological inputs, comma, as they interact, and then we delete directly, with functions and services provided by soil biodiversity, full stop. Delete the rest of the paragraph. Paragraph 4, do you want me to repeat paragraph 414 as well? I'll wait, sorry. Ready? Sorry, too many things. Yes, okay. On paragraph 414, so promote research and capacity building on, we would add sustainable. Then it reads soil management practices. Then we would delete what is between commas, the including agroecological until practices. So it will read capacity building on sustainable soil management practices that ensure conservation and so on. Thank you.
Thank you, Brazil. Give the floor to Argentina, followed by Paraguay and Chile.
Thank you, Chair. We can support the amendments just made by Brazil, and additionally on paragraph 4.7, we would suggest to change promote for ensure. Thank you.
Thank you, Argentina. Give the floor to Paraguay, followed by Chile and France.
Paraguay?
but I can take the floor now if you allow me. Thank you. In paragraph 4.3, we would like to add after adaptation measures and mitigation tools, comma, as well as those caused by the use of hazardous or toxic chemicals, comma, and then it will read as it is. And in paragraph 4.4, in the third line, after taking into account the negative impact of the, and then it will read the negative impact of the inadequate use of pesticides. I'm sorry. That will be our suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you, Chile. Now give the floor to France, followed by Switzerland and Spain.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. France supports Norway's statement concerning the old paragraph 4.13 that we would like to reestablish here, though I believe it is a problem for some parties. Now, concerning paragraph 4.6, we would like to delete the term genomic technologies. In 4.7, we would prefer to come back to the old version of this paragraph. And we would also like to bracket Brazil's proposal so that we could better understand this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, France. I'll give the floor to Switzerland, followed by Spain and Paraguay.
Thank you very much, Chair. We have a comment on 4.7. We would like to add, after promote the access, comma, the fair and equitable sharing. And at the end, we would like to add, as well as with the Nagoya Protocol. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Switzerland. I'll give the floor to Spain, followed by Paraguay and Bolivia.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. My statement is aiming to ask that the Brazil's proposal, as France asked, is bracketed, and that the deletion that was proposed at the end of 4.4 concerning taking into account the negative impact, this must be left in brackets because this is the justification for such evaluations, assessments, and research. We also support France concerning re-establishment of 4.13 and the changes in 4.7. Thank you. I thank you. Spain, paragraph 4.4 contains a number of bracketed languages, so that could influence upon the support of this or that in this paragraph. Paraguay, followed by Bolivia and Austria. I thank you, Mr. Chairman. In 4.8, we would like to bracket language because our delegation continues consultations concerning gender-responsive approaches. We could eliminate the brackets and open it until we finish our internal consultations. So far, we're not able to do that. Concerning 4.14, in accord with the approach that would be more consistent with what we said before that, we would bracket then Brazil's proposals from including two practices. I thank you. Paraguay. Bolivia has the floor, followed by Austria and Argentina.
Bolivia.
Thank you very much, Chair. Well, in the rationale, almost at the end, in the 8th line, after relevant traditional knowledge. I think it is very important to put here, considering that we are referring about research, with free, prior, and informed consent. Thank you.
Gracias, Bolivia.
And thank you, Bolivia. Austria has the floor, followed by Argentina and Colombia.
Thank you very much, Chair. On paragraph 4.4, we would like to retain the original language, so it's our understanding that the amendments proposed here are in brackets. And on paragraph 4.14, we also would like to have the reference here on agroecological and biodiversity-friendly management practices, since this is very important in the context of capacity building and research. So we do not support the deletion of these references. Thank you.
Thank you, Austria. I give the floor to Argentina, followed by Colombia and Brazil.
Thank you, Chair. So, first of all, with regards to the proposal of Norway, as this was discussed in the contact group, we would request to keep that in brackets, if not deleted. Then, on the request by one or two delegations to delete genomic technologies, we would request to keep it or ask as an alternative if we could replace it for molecular biology techniques in 4.6. And finally, if we are to keep the examples between brackets in 4.14, we would request to include the example of sustainable intensification. We are sorry that we are on this place because we have before agreed that we were going to refer in general to sustainable practices, but if we are to keep them here, we want that between brackets as well. Thank you.
Can you ¿puede repetir la expresión?
Could you please repeat which expression, which language you would like to use to replace genomics?
Yes, Chair. So in 4.6, maybe a compromise text could be, instead of genomic technologies, molecular biology techniques. Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you.
Algo de ciencia.
It's so good to see something scientific in our discussions.
Colombia.
I give the floor to Colombia, followed by Brazil and Mexico.
On paragraph 4.15, we understand the relationship with human health in this paragraph. However, we don't want to limit it only to the development of products for health sector. We see opportunities for other sectors on using this soil biodiversity, so we would request to delete what comes after this soil biodiversity wording and make a full stop there. Thank you.
Muchas gracias. Doy la palabra a Brasil.
Thank you. Brazil has the floor, followed by Mexico and Korea.
And I apologize for taking the floor again, but it's very difficult to keep track of all the changes and suggestions that are being made, and there are some reference to different tests, old tests. So I would request to keep in brackets those suggestions made by Norway and the EU until you can see them and have a better assessment. Thank you.
Thank you, Brasil. Ahora doy la palabra a México, seguido de Corea.
Mexico has the floor.
Very minor adjustments on paragraph 4.13. Compile, systematize, and share. We would like to add data and. We believe it's important to share data, not only synthesis.
Gracias, México. La palabra a Corea, seguido de Kenia y Perú.
Korea has the floor.
Regarding para 4.7, Korea suggests to replace the word soil genetic resources with
genetic resources in the soil. There is no soil genetic resources in the context of CBD Nagoya protocols. It's clearly indicated in the definition of genetic resources in Article 2 of CBD. Genetic resources are any materials of plants, animals, microorganisms, or of any origin containing functional unit of heredity. So it is not a plant, an animal, nor a microorganism. More importantly, soil does not have the functional unit of heredity. There could be genetic resources in the soil. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Korea. As you can see, we are over time, so we need to be very efficient. Hopefully, we can finish with this document before leaving. So I invite you to do our best in the next 5 minutes to see we can make it. So I give the floor to Kenya, followed by Cote d'Ivoire and Australia.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to propose an amendment to 4.5 to read promote capacity for research in order to quantify and quantify soil biodiversity. So you include the word there, capacity. And then for 4.6, I would support the position of Argentina to either retain genomic technologies or replace it with the molecular biology technique they have proposed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Kenya. I'll give the floor to Cote d'Ivoire, followed by Australia and Argentina again.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Speaking about 4.14, Cote d'Ivoire would like to add simply one word: management including practices, agroecological practices are in brackets. We have many different practices, and everyone would like to add their own practice in this paragraph. We would like to add soil management.
Can you explain where exactly you want the insertion? Which line?
Le 4.14. Capacité sur les...
We talked about the strengthening on soil management. We just want to add sustainable management of soils. And starting from there, we are putting in brackets, including the ecological practices going all the way up to biodiversity. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much. Australia, followed by Argentina and Costa Rica.
Thank you, Chair. And just on Bolivia's suggestion to include FPIC language, and I do apologise, I missed exactly which paragraph number, but in terms of FPIC language, Australia's preference is prior informed consent. However, if this is not acceptable, then we request prior and informed consent, comma, free prior and informed consent, or approval and involvement in line with the Mush-Cookstell voluntary guidelines. Thank you.
Yeah, it's in accordance with what Bolivia proposed, right? Also, to use agreed language on this point. Thank you. So Argentina, followed by Costa Rica.
Thank you, Chair, and sorry to come back again, but just to react to another suggestion and to request that in 4.13, the introduction of data and be kept in brackets. We need to consult regarding that introduction. Thank you.
Thank you. Costa Rica, followed by Ghana and Peru.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Regarding the paragraph, the point, sorry, 4.56, we would like to retain a reference to genomic technologies, and we will agree to Argentina's proposal to use molecular biology techniques instead if genomic technology doesn't have support. Thank you.
Thank you, Costa Rica. Ghana, followed by Peru and Togo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ghana wishes to support the contribution from Argentina on genomic technologies. At least molecular biology techniques could be used. Thank you.
Thank you. Now Peru, followed by Togo and Malawi.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I didn't hear when you called my name. When we're talking about genomic technologies and molecular biology techniques, we would like to understand the scope of which. Meanwhile, we would like to keep it bracketed. But we would like to note that soil biodiversity is stressed. Since it is already bracketed, we have to make progress because we have limited interpretation time, and we should have clarity on what changes would be dealt with. I'd like to finish this passage of the document before the break. Malawi, Togo will be given the floor.
Togo, you have the floor.
Togo has the floor.
Merci.
I thank you. Togo would like make an addition in 4.13 at the beginning to promote bilateral and regional cooperation in order to facilitate compilation, systematization, and sharing of research results, the rest without any change. Thank you.
Merci, Togo, Malawi, followed by Australia and New Zealand. Last speaker.
Thank you, Chair. In 4.4, Malawi suggests the deletion, rearrangement of the statement to read, promote research and implementation of integrated pest management. The rest remain the same, so we delete and further research and analysis. Let me read again. Promote research and implementation of integrated pest management practices, so the rest remain the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Malawi, Australia, and last speaker, New Zealand.
Thank you, Chair, and apologies for coming back in again. I just wanted to make it very clear that my comments earlier were not in line with Bolivia's suggestion on FPIC language. Our preference is either just prior informed consent or, alternatively, the full tripartite definition under the Mush-Cookstill guidelines, which is prior and informed consent, free prior and informed consent, or approval and involvement, and not the suggestion by Bolivia to just refer to free prior and informed consent. Thank you.
Thank you, and apologies for interpret that way. My mistake. Now, last speaker, New Zealand.
Thank you, Chair, and apologies for intervening. I know we have limited time. Just in building on Australia's intervention, if we could make sure this is bracketed, as you know, there are additions we need to make when this is referenced, and we can do that when we can see it in front of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. With this, I invite the floor to approve element 4 on research and monitoring. We don't have time for more interventions. If there are no objections, element 4 on research, monitoring, and assessment is approved. And last element is number 6 on supporting voluntary guidance, tools, and organizations and initiatives. It's only one paragraph. I open the floor for this paragraph. I see Ghana.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ghana wishes to amend the last sentence, the last line of the last sentence to read, will be made available on the clearinghouse mechanisms of the convention. Mr. Chair, the convention has 2 clearinghouse mechanisms, and both must have it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ghana. Actually, convention has 2, and in addition to all national clearinghouses as well. But with this amendment, I invite the floor to approve section 6, and with this, the whole document to be sent as an L for the corresponding plenary. So this document is approved. So with this, we need to close the session, and as you can see, there's a number of issues that will be undertaken next, the pending issues on the next plenary. So thank you for your cooperation, but I think we need to do a stronger effort to be more efficient in our deliberations, and for the same for my colleagues in the other groups on SBI and the open-ended. I don't know if Secretary has any message? No? If not, see you in the next plenary. Thank you very much. Session is adjourned.